We now refer to what happened as the 1,000-year flood. That means there was a 0.1% chance of it happening on any given year. 0.1% chance. It happened, and the devastation was complete. Think about the rain totals over 2 days, Saturday, May 1st to Sunday, May 2nd, 2010. Nearly 20 inches fell and the Cumberland River crested at close to 52 feet.
Yeah, look at how this building is moving.
Nothing like this had ever been seen before. There's this unforgettable video of an empty portable from Lighthouse Christian Academy, swept off its foundation and floating down Interstate 24. It collided with debris and then disintegrated.
This is amazing.
Not far down the interstate, Alicia Williams and her 2 young children were stranded in the rising waters.
The thought comes to my head that maybe I have to throw them across that wall because, what I said to myself was broken bones are better than a drowned body.
Williams and her children survived, but many others did not. More than 20 people died in the flooding across Tennessee that weekend, including 11 in Davidson County. Hundreds more had to be rescued.
The Nashville flood of 2010 was a once-in-a-lifetime weather event, unforgettable for those who lived through it. I know because I was there, and so many images from the flood are as fresh in my mind today as when I first saw them, like the portable classroom floating down I-24, or the Opryland Hotel, which had to evacuate more than 1,500 people because the first floor was submerged under 10 feet of water. The images were like scenes from Titanic.
I think what I remember the most is thinking, who would have ever thought this would happen in Nashville?
This is Terry Chapman. She was a teacher in the church I served at the time in a town about 60 miles south of Nashville. She and her husband Bill were on the interstate, heading home from disaster relief training, when they found themselves in the middle of one.
All of a sudden, we see people really slowing down, and about the time we get to Bell Road, we're thinking of getting off, but Bell Road is flooded.
They were stuck. The interstate had turned into a parking lot, with flooding somewhere up ahead, forcing people to abandon their vehicles and walk back to the next exit.
After we sat there for maybe 20, 30 minutes, I'm now beginning to understand the feeling of knowing something's coming. You can't get away or get out of it because we had no idea what we would do. So Bill and I, of course, immediately start praying, and he's the driver, so he's really on top of this, but yet I can see the fear that he's having too. Eventually, what we have to do is cars start backing up on the interstate and turn around.
Going the opposite
direction because we cannot go any further. And then when we got off, we didn't know where we were.
It took hours of finding back roads that weren't flooded, but Terry and Bill made it home that day. And when the floodwaters receded, they were in the first wave of volunteers who sprang into action, assisting families whose homes were flooded and needed to be gutted before the process of rebuilding could begin.
Describe the process of gutting a house after a flood.
I've been to places, they call it mudding out, because there will be 6 inches of mud you're walking in. You go in boots and the mask. I've never had to wear the hazmat suit or anything, but there are times where the teams have to wear them in there because we've waited too long to get there and the mold is so bad. But you just go in and you start ripping out the furniture. If it's still left in there, put it out in the front yard. And the people's belongings, if they haven't been able to get things, there'll be clothes, all kind of things like that you just have to take out and throw out in the yard. And then you just go in and you just start ripping out.
All the way down to the studs.
All the way down to the studs, absolutely all the way. Crowbars, whatever you need to get it out. It's just destruction is already in the house.
Right.
So you're in there to remove that destruction so it can now be rebuilt.
So you're basically removing the rot so you can reconstruct the house.
Exactly.
Listening to Terry, you're probably thinking this all sounds so logical and good, right? A disaster has shown up unannounced, wreaked havoc on a community, and then a bunch of people show up to help and want nothing in return. Sounds good, right? But sometimes unexpected things happen, especially with the mix of stress and fear and emotions.
Think about the scene. You've got this entire street and you've got people working and gutting out all of these houses, and you have every front yard is basically where they're removing all this rotted wood or furniture that was moist and stuff. But then there's this one house where there's nothing in the front yard. The house is completely left alone. The family said they really didn't want to do anything. They didn't receive any help. They didn't want to gut the house. I guess they thought because the water came up and left so fast, everything was going to be fine. You remember that family?
I do. I think, like you said, I think they thought it would dry out and it would be okay, but it never does. To me, it kind of felt like they were afraid of losing what they had and that it couldn't be replaced. And probably they were watching everybody else's stuff being put out and thinking, well, we can't replace it. We can't do that. We're going to hang on. If you've lived in that place for 30 or 40 years, then you feel like you're giving a lot of yourself up. Mm-hmm. And so they had to come to that they needed to do that.
When I think about the state of the church in the United States, I think about the Nashville flood and what it was like to clean up after the waters receded, what it took to recover, the work and repair so many homes needed. We've experienced a wave of terrible revelations about the condition of the church in the past decade. So much has come to light. And like those homes that didn't get the attention they needed, there's rot, for sure. Trusted leaders turn away from the truth. Some get exposed as frauds. Others are later revealed to be abusers who twisted their ministry to prey on others. Some compromise their convictions. And then there are all these pressures from the outside, too. How do you respond when people outside the church, or people who have changed their convictions, when they say it's your beliefs that are the problem, That the church is not just backward, but bigoted. That your views aren't just regressive, but repressive. In response, some say that sound doctrine is the only thing that matters. Okay, but what happens when you encounter churches, Bible-believing churches that champion sound doctrine and biblical fidelity, that are incubators of a toxic leadership culture, or that use the facade of biblical truth as a shield that harbors or excuses abusive behavior? And what about the flip side? When it's the sheep that turn on their shepherds, either abandoning or attacking good and faithful pastors, doing their best to challenge them with the scriptures and show them the way of Jesus. In the news clip we just played, they interviewed Carl Dean, who was mayor of Nashville at the time of the flood. And I think there's something instructive for us in the way he sums up how the people of Nashville responded to this disaster.
When the rain finally stopped, the magnitude of what happened hit home.
To respond to this.
Carl Dean had weathered tornadoes, but a flood like this, he said, was much different.
I mean, a tornado is almost like an explosion. I mean, what it does is so evident in terms of buildings being destroyed, roofs being torn off. And a flood is, it hits all parts of the house.
Everything was saturated, and long after the storm had moved on, the muck remained. But Dean says the mess did nothing to deter the thousands of volunteers who worked tirelessly to repair and clean up the city.
To me, the story of the flood will always be the spirit of the people in Nashville, their volunteerism, and the way they just kind of did it right.
There's mold in the house, rotting floors. Sin has seeped in, and it's left a watermark. And even after the floodwaters are gone, after the church split, after the abuser is exposed, after the deconversion, the effects of all that remain. The problem is, the rot is strong. But thankfully, so is the foundation. The church needs workers to help clean up the mess. How can we be a generation that just kind of did it right? My name is Trevin Wax, and I'm the Vice President of Research and Resources at the North American Mission Board. You're listening to Reconstructing Faith. In this series, we address the church's credibility crisis, reflecting on the challenges of today while learning from church history and the church around the world. I hope you'll join me on this journey and consider what you can contribute to the task of restoring and rebuilding the church's witness so that the world would experience the majesty of Jesus. This is episode 2, Renewing the Church.
What we've got is Caedmon Cole's new CD, 40 Acres. I gotta tell you, it rocks. It's a great CD. If you don't have it, they're gonna have it at Mardell's tonight only, just for this special concert, $7.99 for the CD. That's a great price. Come by and pick it up, absolutely. Let's give a big hand together. Are you ready for Caedmon's Call?
In the late 90s, the contemporary Christian music scene was at its high point in terms of sheer creativity. Caedmon's Call combined earnestness and profundity in a way that charmed you and brought you into a deeper conversation. Listening to one of their albums made you want to lean in, to ask the big questions, to mourn your sin and marvel at God. One of the members of Caedmon's Call, Derek Webb, wrote and performed songs rooted in Reformed theology. His first solo album sought to startle the listener with bold theological takes, even earning an explicit label in some Christian bookstores for his candid acknowledgement of the church's idolatries. In 2007, 10 years after the self-titled album from Caedmon's Call, my friend Tony Coomer and I sat down with Derek Webb for a wide-ranging conversation. We brought up his trajectory artistically and theologically, as well as some concerns people were raising about his solo albums.
You have to look at the context around the work I'm doing to understand, like you said, the gospel intention of these later records. Mm-hmm. Because it bothers me for people to think that I no longer have a concern for the gospel. If I didn't have a concern for the gospel, why would I be staking my career and reputation on saying things that I believe are implications of the gospel that I believe on the world in which I live?
Yeah.
I would have no other reason to do it.
That was Derek in 2007. 10 years later, he publicly renounced his Christian convictions. Here he is in 2022, talking with singer-songwriter Michael Gungor on the Liturgists podcast.
Yeah. And so I at least, if I'm going to really leave this thing, if I'm really going to walk away or just put it in a certain perspective or a kind of, if I'm going to do that, then I want to make sure that it's something that I feel intellectually good about, something that I feel like rings true to me. And I want to be able to just catch up with, myself. And just because it's the thing that I most recently left, just because it happens to be the God to whom I am most recently an atheist, but what we're all, there are arguably 10,000 gods before that I am an atheist too. And that's another great.
I love that lyric in your, which one was it?
Oh, I think it's we're all atheists. I just go one God further than you.
Yeah. Remember when we sang about Zeus and whatever you said?
Yeah. We used to sing about Baal and Zeus.
Yeah.
We're all atheists. I just go one God further than you. But it's like, and it's true. And I've even got a song on the new record that's called "Some Gods Deserve Atheists."
Yeah.
And it's like, and I'll probably
so good,
right? And so I'll probably be doing this for the rest of my life.
Derek Webb is not the only contemporary Christian music artist to have left behind his previous convictions. Michael Gungor is in a similar place. So is Kevin Max, one of the 3 members of DC Talk. Then there's Audrey Assad, Jennifer Knapp, and Jonathan Steingart, who is the lead singer for the band Hawk Nelson. And that's just Christian music. We've seen other well-known Christian leaders repudiate the faith, from YouTube stars Rhett and Link to pastor and author Josh Harris. Deconstruction and deconversion are the buzzwords that describe this phenomenon. And now, a cottage industry has sprung up around people radically revising the Christian faith or leaving it behind altogether. Derek Webb is promoting an event called Have Yourself a Deconstructing Christmas for people conflicted about the holiday. Audrey Assad is hosting You Are Your Guru, an event designed to help you, quote, Create your own personal monastery of joy, creativity, and passion on your terms. And for a brief time, Josh Harris was hawking a deconstruction starter pack for $275, until criticism he later acknowledged as valid led him to change plans. Now, as troubling and tragic as I find the phenomenon of deconstruction and deconversion among Christian artists and pastors, I'm more concerned about what is happening at the local church level. What is happening on the ground? Not in the green rooms or backstage passes of Christian celebrity culture, but in ordinary conversations, in ordinary congregations across the country. Pastors tell me they don't worry primarily about the deconstruction or deconversion of their church members. They're worried more about people drifting away from the church, as in no longer gathering together, or resisting accountability, and drifting away from sound doctrine, as in quietly compromising essential truths of Christianity, or abandoning Christian ethics. And that raises the question, why? Why is it so easy to drift? And why do some drift toward deconstruction? To answer that question, we've got to peel back another layer or two and look at the atmosphere of belief these days. Because for many, the church is just optional, not really necessary for living the Christian life.
I was surprised to hear so many parents talk about how on Sundays they would have these conflicts between religion, going to religious services versus going to their kids' soccer tournament.
This is Amy Adamczyk. She's a professor of sociology and the co-author with Christian Smith of a recent book called Handing Down the Faith: How Parents Pass on Their Religion to the Next Generation. One of the things that stood out to me about the research in Amy and Christian's work was that they kept going back to these metaphors to describe how parents were talking about the role of religion in the lives of their children. They used terms like a home base, a foundation, grounding, an anchor, ethical guidance. And when you put these metaphors together, you realize that the purpose of religion is to help you make your way in the world, to make right decisions, and to be a well-rounded individual as an adult.
I remember talking to one Mormon father, and he was like, you know what, we're really in trouble right now because, he was a Mormon living in the New York City area. And he says, you know what, there's nobody for my son to date at the local, where I'm attending my religious services. And he said, I thought about, should we reach out to the local conservative Protestant church and see if we can do some mutual functions? Because at the end of the day, this just isn't, this isn't good. Like I need, my kid wants to date, help me out here. What are we going to do? I get it. Okay. Maybe they're not Mormon, but you know what? They have a lot of the same values we do. So let's figure out a way to make this useful.
Let me shift gears here briefly, just because in talking about the sort of therapeutic and moral value of the congregation to a family that's trying to transmit their religious values to the next generation, your example of a Mormon father wanting to connect with conservative Protestants because they're looking for a potential mate, like that, in some sense, if you're thinking about the actual beliefs and truth and falsehood of, Mormonism versus traditional Christianity in some way, I mean, those are very stark different beliefs, even if a lot of the morals are similar. What's funny about that story is I guess it's just revealing that it's the moral value that the father is looking at when it comes to the congregation, more so than it is the actual metaphysical beliefs and things like that. So is that one of the reasons you think that we see so many people mixing and matching from different religions? I mean, I guess my point here is to say some people go to church, they may be involved at some level, but they don't feel that it's strange to accept certain teachings of the church, reject other teachings, accept certain demands and practices of the church, reject others, just based on sort of where they feel their need is.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was definitely a sense of a toolkit approach going on here. And yeah, people were taking what it is that they need and leaving the other stuff behind and not thinking like, how much consistency is there across these various things? It was more like, you know what, if this is useful, this is what we're going to do. And that was a very interesting thing throughout the interviews. So not just mixing and matching with religion, but mixing and matching with a variety. It was like parents just want to provide as much information and tools as they could to their kids. And, in some cases, religion wasn't always the most important tool. It was important for some things. I think for a lot of things related to morals and ethics and behavior, and it could be quite useful, but it wasn't the be all end all. And then and certainly across religions, then when the new things came up, if that was useful, then why not take it?
Here's the takeaway from this brief detour into Christian Smith and Amy Adamczyk's research. We live in a culture where most people believe religion is really about morality, being a good person. As long as you believe in something bigger than yourself, and as long as you try to be a good person, you're free to take whatever parts of a religion make sense, whatever works for you, and cast aside whatever parts don't. Because being good, isn't that the point?
Raven, do you think, though, that these atheists put it up there like to say to some people who are evangelical, let's say, or very good Christians like our darling Candace, like, in case you don't want to go to church, it's okay. Like, there must be a few out there who don't really want to do it.
This is Joy Behar from a brief conversation on ABC's The View in the fall of 2015. They're talking about a billboard campaign from a group of atheists telling people to go ahead and skip church and be good for goodness sake. I highlight it here because I want you to listen to Raven's answer, and then note how Candace Cameron Bure and Paula Ferris surprise Joy and Raven with a counterpoint. That counterpoint seems controversial because, like I said, it's just common sense that religion is all about being a good person.
Well, I think that there is kind of a stigma if in some places people are feeling like they're forced to go to church during Christmas, or they're forced to feel some type of Christian way because of Christmas, when ultimately we've taken this amazing holiday and what it really stands for, the birth of Jesus Christ, and turned it into a big fat man with a white beard and how many presents can you buy me or give, and gifting. And I don't think that they were trying to take people out of their religion or promote theirs. No. And I don't have a problem with it because you don't have to go to you don't have to go to church on Christmas. And it is about being good. And that's what all religions are about anyway. Be a good person.
Yeah, the one thing I don't like about it.
You don't think all religions have the thing of be a good person?
Not Christianity, but by grace through faith.
Yeah. What?
By grace through faith you've been saved. So it's nothing that we can do.
No word. I'm a good girl. I don't know what they're worried about.
But Joy, then what? But what is the standard of goodness?
Be good to your neighbor. Don't cheat on your husband. Don't steal.
But in the Bible,
don't
but
murder.
Here's the thing.
Don't murder anybody. Pretty simple. Very simple also.
But in the Bible, God's standard is the 10 Commandments.
I'm good on that too.
You've never told a lie before, ever?
What, is that one of the commandments?
It's the commandment.
Never mind.
So maybe the 9 commandments
That's my point. God's standard of goodness
You're going to kill me for that?
Well, God says if you've disobeyed but one commandment, it says if you've disobeyed all of them. So if God's standard is different by which he judges the world, then that's where the argument of only being a good person then leads to the gospel.
Okay. And let me just say on that.
I love that exchange because it upsets the common sense view that's out there. You can hear it in the, wait, what? Response from Raven, when the idea that religion is just about being a good person gets contradicted, and the notion of grace gets brought up. So, back to the reason why drifting is so common, and why deconstruction makes sense today. The common sense view goes like this. The purpose of life is to discover yourself by looking inside to your deepest desires, and then you express yourself to the world and expect to receive admiration and affirmation. Contrary to what you may think, church-going can fit comfortably in that framework. Plenty of people go to church because they want a spiritual dimension to their lives, something that helps them be good, moral, decent people. Here's the thing. Even though we might lament the fact that people often go to church for the wrong reasons, the beautiful thing is, at least they're there, right? Pastors and teachers can bring the fresh word of grace to people who think life is all about being a good person. We can shine the light of God's law and the love of God's gospel onto the human heart in ways that upset the common sense framework, just like Candace and Paula did on The View. But here's the problem right now. What happens when the church loses credibility as a force for moral good in the world? What happens when the church is no longer seen as this incubator of morals and values, a place where goodness and virtue shine? What happens when the scandals we've been talking about, when the moral rot, corruption, and injustice becomes evident, on display for all the world to see? When people's faith in the church as a morally formative institution gets shaken, what next? Do you see how it all connects? The cultural air we breathe says religion is all about moral goodness and virtue. And the church has a credibility crisis because there are so many examples of moral rot and corruption instead. And then, back to the deconstruction conversation, what happens when there are countless testimonies and communities of deconversion and deconstruction waiting for disillusioned Christians with open arms? Well-known deconverted celebrities telling everyone on YouTube and in podcasts and books that it's not just the church that is the problem, but Christianity, the whole thing. You see the challenge now? We'll be right back. As we've seen in this podcast, many churches are in distress or seeing decline these days. We live in an ailing culture in need of grace and healing. And so I want to tell you about my book, The Thrill of Orthodoxy, because I believe that rediscovering the goodness of the gospel and recapturing the relevance of historic Christian teaching, that is what is going to reinvigorate the church in our time. The future of the church is going to be forged by those with roots that run deep through the ages of the Christian church and back into the pages of God's Word. It's not going to be led by those who jump on the bandwagon of fads and fashions. No, the future is going to follow the path of pilgrims who seek the Spirit of God, who are thrilled by the discovery and definition of orthodoxy. So I hope you'll check out the book, The Thrill of Orthodoxy, and that it will reinvigorate you as well. That's a song from DC Talk in 1998, lamenting the fictional defection of a band member from the faith. It's one of many songs that came out in the mid to late 90s, intended to fortify the faith of young people in the face of cultural pressures, no matter who might let us down. Talk to Christians today, and you'll hear a sense of grief expressed for those who've gone away, who've left the church. Nearly everyone I talk to knows at least one or two people, maybe a handful, who have left the church. Some loudly, some quietly. What is the cause of this? Some point to the external challenges that make it harder to confess faith. Others point to internal problems. Here's what I mean. If you see the biggest threats to the church's witness as external, in other words, coming from outside the church, say from government coercion or societal pressure, you're more likely to adopt a posture of defending the church as an institution from outside forces that may do us harm. You take on the role of preserving the church, protecting its reputation, boosting the institution. If you see the biggest threats to the church's witness as internal, in other words, coming from inside the church, say from corruption, abuse, or racism, you're more likely to take on a posture of purging the church, of dismantling whatever systems or beliefs you think were part of the problem, or whatever provided cover for wrongdoing. People with these postures tend to divide into two camps. Those who see the external challenges more clearly are most concerned about succumbing to cultural pressure and moving away from theological orthodoxy. Those who see the internal challenges more clearly are most concerned about failing to devote attention to significant injustices and ongoing problems. So, on the one side, you've got conservative types who are prone to protect the church at all costs, sometimes by defending the indefensible, waving away real and enduring problems, failing to engage in any serious reflection on how certain church practices or how one's posture might lead to complicity in injustice. They're like the people in the house down the street after the flood. There's mold there, but they're more concerned about the outside forces that could harm the home. And they worry that if they start gutting the house, they'll leave it weaker, not stronger. and they might damage the structure. On the other side, you've got progressive types who are prone to purge the church, sometimes by saying the entire structure is irredeemable, that we need to dismantle the church completely because racism has seeped into everything, or that everything about the church is designed to uphold sexist and misogynist assumptions, as if the church has become nothing more than a front for perpetuating injustice. They're like people who, after a flood, would rather just blow up the house completely, foundation and all, because that's the only way we'll get to a better future. But why can't we see that there are both outside and inside forces that harm the church? What if we can do two things at once? Remove the rot and fortify the foundations? What if we push back against the conservative impulse that would leave us satisfied with the status quo and say, you know what? The church will be stronger if we can strip the moldy floors, remove this rot, and still protect the load-bearing walls and make stronger the foundation so we can withstand the outside threats. And what if we push back against the progressive impulse that would lead us toward the abandonment of orthodoxy and say, we recognize serious problems inside this house, yes, but we will address those by digging deeper into what we believe, what the Bible says, what the church has taught, not move away from that, because there's enough evidence in history and around the world to show that this gospel we've received is beautiful and powerful.
The tune of Jesus is still beautiful, even if Christians have sung out of tune. And you can read the tune for yourself in the Gospels.
This is John Dickson again, an Australian church leader who is now a professor at Wheaton College. He's the author of Bullies and Saints, an honest look at the good and evil of Christian history.
So the composition is beautiful. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who mistreat you, which isn't just an arbitrary ethic. I mean, it's the whole arc of Jesus' life history, loving the enemy, doing good to those who hated him, and giving his life for enemies on the cross, right? So it's not just an arbitrary ethic, it's like the very logic of the Christian faith. Yes, so that's the beautiful tune. Christians have sung out of tune. Christians behaving badly is the minority report. I would say in most centuries of the church, most Christians sang the tune recognizably. And you just think of it today, right? You think of some church that's had some terrible scandal because a pastor has done something terrible. That will get all the headlines. That will take all of our focus. People will say, oh, that's exactly what Christianity does. But then if you stop and you ask yourself, what about the, 500,000, 5,000 people in the church? Don't they also come into the equation? Of course they do. And the majority of them are more shocked and disappointed than any of the media are at what happened, what their leader did. They are singing the tune. They are bumbling their way along, trying to believe the gospel and trust the gospel. And they're let down spectacularly, and that gets all the airtime. But again, the majority of Christians in that church are still trying to walk the path, sing the tune.
I love the image of the melody, coming through the centuries, the beautiful Christian melody, even as many Christians fail to play in tune. I love that you use this metaphor. I use it in my book, The Thrill of Orthodoxy, crediting you, of course, but I also have found it's got a really ancient pedigree. I came across, and as I was studying this, I came across this line in the early church father Ignatius's letter to the Ephesians, probably written around AD 107, so extraordinarily early. He says, in your unanimity and harmonious love, Jesus Christ is sung. Now you must join the chorus, each of you, so that being in harmonious unanimity, taking your pitch from God, you may sing in unity in one voice through Jesus Christ to the Father, so that he may also hear and may recognize you through your good actions, being members of his Son.
Yeah. Cool. I'll take that. I love Ignatius.
Well, I found another one from Basil as well. Basil the Great, AD 375. He says, it is impossible to maintain a life of holiness without the Spirit. it would be easier for an army to continue its maneuvers without a general, or, and here's the one that sounds like you, or for a choir to sing on key without its director. So the emphasis there with Basil is we're singing a song.
Yeah.
But thankfully we have the Spirit's guidance as we see in the Gospels medley. So when we talk about the Spirit's guidance and the Spirit guiding throughout church history, you talk about how Christian history has this built-in corrective at the heart of the faith. And you see this throughout church history. So help us say, what does that corrective look like? How does God bring about reformation when it's needed?
Someone reads the Gospels and says, hang on, we don't look like this. That's really the pattern that you see. I mean, you find it in just about every century. There is this self-corrective mechanism in Christianity. Because anyone who opens a gospel, doesn't matter what it is, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, whatever, will constantly find the Lord himself criticizing hypocrisy. And in the case of Matthew and Luke, saying, take the plank out of your eye. Then you'll see the speck in another's. And he's saying that to his disciples. And so there's this logic in Christianity that the person you're looking at, sure, they have sin, but so do you. And when you have a speck in your eye, it feels like a log. And so deal with the log in your own eye. Now that's the inbuilt corrective that is in Christianity. We must never see ourselves as the righteous. We should always be nervous that we have a log in our eye.
The name of your book is Bullies and Saints. But one of the complicating aspects of Christianity is that sometimes that bullying and sainthood is all mixed up. Like the way I would put it is, you might hear a Christian leader singing one verse flawlessly and then botching the next verse entirely, right? That great good and evil can often be mixed up in the same person. So help us. It would be really easy for us to just basically categorize everybody in Christian history as hero, villain. And yet it's just more complicated than that.
I'll say.
And what do we learn from that?
Well, we learn that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Right. On one level, we learn just a basic biblical truth that this side of the kingdom come, we are, despite having the deposit of the Spirit, flawed. You see this mixed nature. Obviously, you see it in the New Testament, right? So you see, I am forever encouraged and struck by 1 Corinthians, because there, Paul, on the one hand, praises the Corinthians for having so many things going for them and being endowed with all sorts of gifts of the Spirit and so on. And then you turn over the page, you learn that they've, rank dissension and someone's hooked up with his mother or mother-in-law or stepmother and worse, right?
So why shouldn't I just reject Christianity? I mean, it's obvious this can't be a real thing. How would you respond to someone who looks at the credibility crisis in the church and says, well, that's the reason to reject it all?
I'd say there's something to that. I wouldn't dismiss it or try and defend the Christianity too quickly. I'd want to sit in the darkness, sit in the muck with them, and get a sense of what they have experienced. I mean, the first thing always to do when people raise a criticism is just to ask them why. What's been your experience? Because a lot of people who reject the faith, they're not idiots, right? They've got some reason. And the reason may not in the end be adequate, but it's nonetheless a reason. So I say that not just as a strategy, just as reality. But if they'll permit me to go further than just sit in the muck, I would point out that the tune of Jesus is still beautiful.
What if I stumble? What if I fall?
The meaning of Reformation means we return to a form. The reason why some Christians, with good intentions, intend to protect the church and wind up defending rot, and the reason why other Christians, also with good motivations, think they are purging the church and wind up blowing up foundational pillars of orthodoxy, is because we have a hard time distinguishing between what's rotted and what's essential. When you're gutting a house, you've got to take it back down to the studs. But if you take out the studs, the load-bearing walls, the house will collapse. The key is to know the difference between what can and must be replaced and what is irreplaceable. The difference between the foundation, that's solid and sturdy, and the drywall that can be torn out and replaced. The best way to discern what's essential to the Christian faith is with an open Bible in front of you, and then to acquaint yourself with the church throughout history and also the church around the world. We go back to the scriptures, reading alongside an ancient and global community, and with hearts open to the refreshing rain of repentance, and then with hands ready to get busy in the rebuilding and reconstructing process. We'll be back after this message. We've been talking about in this podcast the credibility crisis that the church is facing. But there's also areas where the church is doing amazing work. And Send Relief is a good example of that. It's a collaboration between the International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board. Send Relief is the one-stop shop for compassion ministry at home and around the world. I get excited about Send Relief because I see how they respond to crisis and how they strengthen vulnerable communities by meeting physical and spiritual needs in Jesus' name. Send Relief offers ways to serve through mission trips and other compassion projects, as well as training to help your church start new projects to help people in need in their communities. Also, when you give to Send Relief, 100% of your gift goes directly to projects. Nothing is taken out for administrative costs. So I encourage you to visit sendrelief.org to learn more about what Send Relief is and how you can join them to help meet needs and change lives on the other side of the world and in your own backyard.
The church is one foundation, is Jesus Christ her Lord. She is his new creation.
For 2,000 years, the church, often in spite of herself, has soldiered on. Every generation, it seems, in one place or another, we're told the church is dying, the church is dead, the church is in decline, the church is in danger. But in every generation, the light, somewhere, somehow, continues to shine. The church is continually renewed. What will that renewal look like in our generation? This is John Stott, British theologian and pastor, preaching at the Urbana Missions Conference in 1976. John Stott took seriously the global impulse of Christian mission and the great need of churches all across the world to learn from each other as they exalt the Savior and seek to fulfill his mission. Global Christians, global vision, global God. We need the wisdom of John Stott here because if we're going to renew the church, we need not only church history, but also the church around the world. One of the best ways to maintain sound doctrine and gain perspective on some of society's most heated debates is to stay in close contact with Christians of different cultures. Cultural quirks and theological distinctions will help you discern what's essential and where Christians can agree to disagree. It's important to recognize that many people who submit to the authority of God's word have disagreements over the wisest ways to interpret and apply it in different cultural contexts. Everyone loves that phrase, in the essentials unity, in the non-essentials liberty, in all things charity. But that only works if you know the difference between essentials and non-essentials. That's why we need to stay connected to the church around the world. Nothing puts our squabbles in perspective and aids our discernment of what is most important than reading the Bible alongside our worldwide family of faith. In upcoming episodes, we'll be looking at social media, the question of authority and authoritarianism in the church, Christian engagement in politics, purity culture and the Christian sexual ethic, racial injustice, and sex abuse scandals. Yes, we're going to be honest about what's rotted, but with an eye to bringing about restoration. It's time to rebuild. Next time on Reconstructing Faith, the water is toxic. We discuss social media in the church today.
And I know the internet's sort of, at least on a broad level, it's been around for a quarter century or so, but it's still pretty early, especially because of the way digital technology evolves and really specifically the pace at which it evolves. I do wonder if, 50 years from now, we're going to look back at these little black boxes that kids even carry around in their back pockets and ask ourselves, how in the world did we let 12-year-olds have those? How in the world did we let 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and even us as adults, how did we just so carelessly, thoughtlessly walk around inhaling sort of the potential toxicity of the digital air that we all seem to be breathing today?
Reconstructing Faith is a podcast powered by the North American Mission Board. If you have comments or questions you'd like us to address, please give us feedback at resources@namb.net. That's resources@namb.net. If this podcast is helpful to you, it would be helpful to us if you'd leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to and share it with your friends. Reconstructing Faith is written by Trevin Wax. Our show is produced and edited by Scott Slusher. Our sound design is composed, mixed, and mastered by Dan Phelps. Aaron Leslie handles our audio editing and engineering. Story editing and consulting is by Amy Simpson. Also, please check out my book, The Thrill of Orthodoxy, Rediscovering the Adventure of Christian Faith. Until next time.